Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for those who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of your life. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. Our guest today has one hell of a story. By the age of 21, Mastin Kipp was living life in a Hollywood fast lane. As a music manager, sex, drugs, and rock and roll were more than just a cliche. It was an actual lifestyle that was quickly running him into the ground. After an altercation with the law, he had his moment of clarity and decided to completely redefine his life. Within years, he'd find his purpose helping others, garnering the attention of Kim Kardashian, and a seat on Oprah Winfrey's infamous couch. Today, Mastin has touched the lives of millions of people, and he joins us here on Self-Made Man to help you find your life's purpose. All of us have hidden mental and emotional blocks, experiences, and stories that prevent us from achieving our full potential. Well, it's time to uncover those and to remove them from our lives once and for all so that we can move forward. Please help me welcome Mastin Kipp. Mastin Kipp, welcome to Self-Made Man. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me. So excited to be here.
Absolutely. So your book is one that was referred to me by a friend a few months ago, and I dove into it. And within the first two chapters, I was like, wow, this is really, really, really freaking awesome. And wanted to get you on the show. So I'm really grateful for the time today. And
yeah,
looking forward to diving in. And, you know, you and I were talking earlier about what we want the agenda of our time together to be today. And one of the things that's really at the core of your book is how do you find your purpose in life, really?
Yes.
And I think there's a bunch of young entrepreneurs who are listening to this who are trying to figure that out still. And the process you've put together is phenomenal. So that's the plan and the agenda today. But before we dive into your teachings in that area, you have one of the best stories that I've ever heard. I'll let you dive into it, but essentially it goes from bottom of the barrel, you know, getting arrested and all kinds of crazy stuff to ending up on Oprah, right? So,
yeah, she was short on guests that week.
Right. So for those who are not familiar with you and haven't heard your story yet, sure, I would love to dive into that.
Sure. You know, one of the things about, especially entrepreneurs, you know, we have very short attention spans and we want to know, like, why am I listening to this person? What's in it for me? So just context for the story, you know, the idea here is that, like, literally what I've been through, if I can get through what I've been through and have a successful business, like, there's so much richness in understanding someone's origin. I think that there's a lot of valuable lessons there. And I specifically wrote my first book about the story so I could capture it in the moment and really be able to relate that mindset of, like, the early days. Because the early days of anything is when, you know, your projects, your business, your confidence is very low. It's, you know, there's no real proof that what you're doing is possible yet. You know, you're doubting yourself. The doubt is high, especially with peer group and family and friends and stuff. So I think that, you know, you may, if you're in that space, I think that what I'm about to share with you might be very helpful for you to kind of, like, keep going. Also, if you're not in that space and you're further along, I think that it's really interesting that, like, we have, I think, different moments of, like, sort of, like, you know, rebirth or, you know, finding something new. So maybe you're in a current business and you want to create a new business that's still relevant to you. So I had come to Los Angeles, California from Kansas to get into the music business, and I wanted to be like David Geffen. He was a role model of mine. I wanted to be the straight version of David Geffen. And I think someone who's really occupying what I had imagined myself being was a guy named Scooter Braun, who's Justin Bieber's manager. You know, so I kind of wanted to do what Scooter is doing now, many, many years ago.
How old were you?
I was probably, I moved to Los Angeles when I was 19 years old.
Okay, yeah.
So young. Yeah, I was young. And I had made an early connection with a band in the late 90s called Limp Bizkit that was very popular back then, and became friends with them and their management team. And when I moved to Los Angeles, connected with them very early on and basically became an intern, which was, you know, code word for basically, like, someone's a bitch. You know, you're kind of like just a gopher doing stuff. But I just fell in love with, like, how, you know, in management, it's such a strange world because people want to know what a manager does. You're sort of like the CEO and implementer for this very visionary artist vision. And at this management company, it was called The Firm. You know, we had multiple platinum artists. And so I got to see the behind the scenes of, like, you know, creating and blowing up bands like Linkin Park, Audio Slave, Limp Bizkit, Stained, Puddle of Mud, you know, the Backstreet Boys, Enrique Iglesias, Britney Spears. Like, it was very fascinating. I watched them launch a clothing brand called Pony, from like nothing, then getting on all the celebrities in the early 2000s and then selling it to for millions and millions of dollars. And it was very inspiring because I was from Kansas. I was like, this is awesome. And, to keep up and stuff like that, I, started doing cocaine and was really into drugs and alcohol because, the scene back then was like, that's what you do is you just go out and party. And that's where most of the networking was happening. And for a period of time, I was the first one in, the last one out. A lot of that was fueled by drugs. And I became aware of like the 24 hours in the day and the different time zones because we had, tours in Australia and London and Europe and the US and Canada and Mexico and Japan all happening at once. So I started to really use my days up pretty significantly. And my goal, my vision was I wanted to run A&R, artist and repertoire, for a record company called Flawless Geffen Records. That was Fred Durst's record label. We had a band called Puddle of Mud on that label. They had a song in the early 2000s called Blurry that was very famous and well known.
I'm 40, so this is all in my sweet spot.
Okay, good. It's just context, because who's Martin? Like, this is not the day and age of Martin Garrix and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I got that gig. Fred hired me. I'd been working for the management company for about 2 years, and Fred hired me. And I was there for about 3 months, and then Jordan Schur, who was the president of Geffen Records, fired me. Actually, not because of drugs, believe it or not, but because I was working at the management company, I had a very close relationships with artists, and I think it made Jordan upset. And I'm far enough away from that now where I can talk about it. I didn't talk about it and name him publicly for many years because he just was too close to it, but now is the time to sort of talk more about this type of stuff. And Jordan sort of went behind my back and kind of lied to Fred about, like what I was doing. And I think he was just insecure because I had a great relationship with the clients and essentially just kind of like create a rift. And then Fred had no choice because, Jordan was running the show. Jordan made it impossible for me to work there. And that threw me into this tremendous uncertainty at the age of 21, thinking like, what am I supposed to do with my life? Like, this was my thing. And I was completely high and, doing cocaine and drinking lots of wine and alcohol. And about 2 weeks after I left, I had started reading my very first personal development book, which was The 7 Habits by Stephen Covey. And I remember in that book reading something he said, which was seek to understand before you are understood. And I thought about just that one like little truism. If I had known that 5 or 10 years earlier, how different my life would have been in high school, college, dropping out of college, being in the entertainment business. And I thought to myself, like, wow, like, what else don't I know? And that was sort of like the foray into personal development. And as I'm sure you know, like, once you're in, like, you just go down the rabbit hole. And all the different recommendation engines on iTunes and Amazon just like became my best friend and like worst nightmare because I just kept buying stuff and going deeper and deeper and deeper. And I finally made an intention to feel as good off the drugs as I did on the drugs. And that led me to, it's been, I don't know, like 15, 16 years since then. And really like diving into personal development, understanding why things happen as they do. And, I got this early sort of like master's degree in being an entrepreneur as a manager in the music business, because that's basically what managers do is they just make stuff happen now with very demanding clients. And so I decided, like, I'm going to turn that around and start my own company. And I concurrently was managing another client at the time, a band called Gnarls Barkley. And we had a song called Crazy that was very popular. And I concurrently had a t-shirt company called Love Yourself. And Gnarls Barkley just blew up. I mean, that song was massive. And we were headlining Coachella in front of like 50, 60,000 people. I get to work on the Grammys, which is amazing. And they performed at the Grammys. They won some Grammys. And I remember being at the Grammys and walking CeeLo down the red carpet and thinking to myself, like, this feels like high school. This is unbelievable. Like, I do not like this. This is not real. And yet again, I had a little bit of a crisis. So I decided to leave the music business and continue on this apparel path. And the apparel company went well for about a year. And it's true when I say we're really big in Japan. Actually, it's true. And so we had all these orders and things were coming in because it was very much like similar to like a company today would be like Spiritual Gangster. We were many years before that. And as that was going and we were starting to scale and grow, my business partner, basically, who was the creative part, the designer, took all of his designs away and basically said, like, I'm out, and sort of essentially killed the business. And I thought to myself, like, what the hell? Like, I thought this is like my thing again. So this is like 2 or 3 things in a row of like, I thought this was my thing and it's not my thing. And that put me into a really deep depression for a long period of time. And concurrently, because I'd been doing so much personal development work, Kundalini yoga, I thought to myself, well, maybe this is a chance for me to actually put into practice all these stupid books I've been reading forever. Like maybe they're actually true. Like maybe, what Tony Robbins says or what Wayne Dyer is saying to me or Carolyn Mace or, Richard Branson, like maybe it's actually true. So if it's true, I can't go back into the music business. I need to keep going. And so I moved into my ex-girlfriend's parents' pool house. It was very sort of embarrassing process, especially because the last time they saw me, I was this big record executive, and now I'm a blogger that's like broke, like what? Because nobody, like back then, like 2008, 9, people were like blogging, like what's that?
Right.
Then there was no podcasts and there was no blogging and no information marketing companies or businesses like there are today. It was just sort of like, what are you doing? Like writing on the internet, you're not gonna make money with that. But, dedicating myself and creating this company called The Daily Love, which was a sort of a aggregator of personal development voices and a little bit of my own, kind of propelled me, that consistency of putting out content really compelled me and put me into this place of being separate and standing out because I think the consistency was there and I was just didn't care about, wasn't writing to make money. I was just writing almost as a therapeutic outlet for the hurt that I was going through. And it kind of caught on, and I guess you could say it went viral and celebrities started following it. Kim Kardashian, I've wrote about this in my book, talks about, she actually, tweeted it out to millions of people back when Twitter was as relevant as Instagram is now. So we just got flooded with followers. And one of those people was a man named Jason Bin, who's a man around town in New York City and a media mogul. And we became friends. And then he introduced me to Tony Robbins. And then I was front and center at Tony Robbins' event. And in that moment, I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do with my life. Like I was watching Tony do interventions and working with people and being irreverent and saying the F word and making people laugh and not getting people weren't mad at him. They wanted him to cuss more. Like I was like, what is going on here? And so I fell in love with intervention and figuring out root cause trauma and like what makes people get stuck. And I've been really focused on that since about 2010 or 11. I've been to his UPW, Date with Destiny. Tony's a buddy of mine. And I would say his work has really impacted me in a significant way, both in changing my life and then giving me clarity on like, that's what I want to do with my life. Because I didn't know you could do that before, And I also got, I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but I got dragged kicking and screaming into the personal development space because I wanted to be David Geffen and I wanted to be in the music business. And I wanted to be this powerful entertainment executive type guy calling shots and stuff. And as I reflect back, I'm grateful that I kind of got kicked out of that business in a sense many, many years ago because I see what's unfolding in the entertainment business today. And I would have been right in the middle of all the sort of that negativity because I was around a lot of the players who are being talked about today.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, like it was kind of like grace, in a sense, like protecting me from future pain. And what's ironic now is I work with like 95% women to help them with trauma. So it's been like a total, like 180, but it's been amazing to be able to really focus on service and to get into this work and talk about purpose and talk about what's blocking people and be able to, have the experience of that process of being deep in addiction and then kind of going through that redemptive process and, being an entrepreneur and being able to come out the other side. And, it's always fun to tell the story, but I never want to live it again.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I went through Date with Destiny in 2014. It was actually the event that they filmed the documentary at.
Amazing.
Yeah, life-changing. That's where Self-Made Man came out of, was that event.
Oh, come on. No way.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
So,
Destiny, if you haven't been, you got to go.
Gotta go. So, everybody who's listening to this, you're listening to this because I went to that event. So,
well, in many ways, I'm here because of that event too. So,
yeah, exactly.
Like double dose.
So, let's talk about how to find your purpose, and specifically, I would love to dive into how to identify and clear, as you mentioned just a minute ago, the blocks, right? Sure. That are preventing people from fulfilling their potential. Maybe it's the stories they're telling themselves, right? I know we all have them. I know I have mine, but I'm still trying to work through. But let's dive into that.
Sure. So I had to provide some context to really create a proper definition of what purpose is. And the reason why is because a lot of people use words, especially in personal development, but we use words all day long that we think we know what it means, but we actually have no clue what it means. So the clinical definition of purpose is really an aim or life goal that stimulates behavior and stimulates change, essentially. It's a reason why you get off your butt and actually change. I think of purpose a little bit differently because, when I think about, the utility of something being useful, I look at the body as a tool, if you will. And what fuels us and what makes the body go, and like why do we get up, and why do we want to be an entrepreneur, take risks, or what is stimulating it? Let's go a little bit deeper than that. And what you see is that any goal that we set, whether it's a financial goal, romantic goal, some type of business goal, relationship goal, any goal that we set, anything that we want to achieve, whether it's launching a man in space in Tesla, or like finding the love of your life, or being a billionaire, or finding inner peace. Like whatever the goal is, we all set goals for one purpose, which is for the emotional payoff or the emotional resolution that we believe that goal will bring us. And so that's why a lot of people, when they set goals and they achieve them, aren't happy for very long. And I had a friend of mine who all they wanted was to be a New York Times bestseller. And they were happy for 3 days, and they didn't care after that. So all that hard work and stress for 3 days of a happiness payoff, it's not really worth it. So we want to create a life that we have an autotelic experience. And what that means is that the means and the end are the same, that we enjoy the process as much as the outcome, and we're not living for the horizon one day. And so when I think of it that way, and we think about, we're looking for the emotional payoff, then what we learn is that life is really an emotional game. And it's the emotions that really matter most. And so the way that I define purpose is that the purpose is an emotional state that you take responsibility for generating within yourself and then expressing to the world in the form of service to others. So you have to take responsibility for your own emotional state and then learn how to essentially transfer those emotions to others in the form of service. And let me ground that for a second so that people understand a little bit more what I mean. If you think about, for example, having a successful company, part of having a successful company is having a really rich culture. And a culture in a company is nothing more than the collective emotional states of your employees and your team. And if you think about really fantastic, for example, customer service or customer experience, what you're doing is creating a really positive emotional association with your brand, with your program, with your course, with your product. And when people have that positive emotional association with what you're selling, that's called, raving fan clients. So if you can create amazing emotional states in a culture and in clients, you're going to have a very successful business. And same thing is true in a relationship. Think about no one ever left a relationship because the other person made them really happy. So if you really think about the purpose of a relationship, it's really, again, it's the transference and the creation of better and better positive emotional states. And if you think about any religion, basically every religious teacher or coach has basically said, give up these lower emotions and create better emotions. Whether it's love, joy, freedom, whatever it might be. So what happens is that we have all these external goals that we're going for, and we're empty on the inside. And we think the drugs, the sex, the alcohol, the money, the followers, the fame, the downloads, whatever will bring us the happiness, when ultimately it's actually the happiness is something that we need to be generating and bringing forward. So that's why we look everywhere for something that's actually inside us. So how the heck do I do that? Well, the best way I know how to do that is to actually not necessarily just follow your bliss at first. In the book, I talk about follow your blisters. And what I mean by that is that everyone has this focus on where they want to go. They have focus on the joy and the love and the success that they want to create. And we have this aversion to looking at the blocks or the negative stories or the negative emotional states. And we've almost, in the personal development space, kind of turned negative stories, negative emotions, or any of that doubt stuff into Voldemort. And we can't say its name because we think if we say what we're scared of, or if we talk about what we're afraid of, that somehow magically we're going to create the very thing that we're afraid of. But what's so ironic is that it's actually in the negation and not admitting what we're afraid of that we actually create the life that we're afraid of. It's in the negation and not owning our emotional states and negative states that we perpetuate them. And so really what purpose is about is really learning that the hurt, the pain, the negativity that you've been through has an incredible purpose in your life that can catalyze or change or shift you into understanding more about what you need to feel good and then how you can help other people feel good in a way too. So what that means essentially is that I believe that your pain is the pathway to your purpose. So a lot of times people will go, well, what's my passion? And I think that's very self-centered. I think it's more about falling in love with problems that you want to solve, which are typically ones you've gone through yourself. And then, really dedicating yourself to solving problems. And when you do that, when you start to solve the problems that you love and care most about, you'll find your passion. And so it's, Cal Newport, the author of Deep Work, talks about having this craftsmanship mindset versus what's my passion mindset. And I'm a big believer in that process as well. So if you look at like where you're frustrated, we can start to extrapolate out what you really want. And we can also start to look at, okay, like there's probably a problem that's here that you need to solve. And there's probably a problem in the world that you are noticing. So that sort of if there's a Venn diagram, the combination of those two areas really helps us give a meaning and a context and a focus to what I want to do with my life. And then I have to realize that it's never going to be static. So it's not like my purpose is a business or a job or a relationship or having a child. Those are all extensions of my purpose, because my job, if I'm going to live my purpose, is to generate my emotional states and share those with my family, my friends, my coworkers, my team, whoever I'm working with, random strangers on the street, because that's what it is. How you express that will change all the time. And so when people talk about, I don't know what my purpose is, what they're really saying is, I'm not sure what the vehicle for my purpose is right now. Or if they're saying I have lots of different purposes, what they're saying is I have lots of different vehicles for this expression of emotional states. But at the end of the day, it always gets back to emotional states.
So how does someone take control of their emotional state? And real quick, one of the best examples that I think you see most common in folks who kind of live out the process you just discussed is in the health and fitness space, right? If someone's not in the health that they want to be, if they don't like their level of self-esteem, or if they've had an injury, going through the transformation process physically and being able to essentially solve their own problem. And if they get the result and transform themselves, they're now equipped with an entirely new skill set and knowledge that they can use to help inspire and teach others to do the same, right?
That's right. 100%.
And you've just seen that so many times in that industry.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Anyway, I digress back to what I was just going to ask you about. How do we generate those emotions?
I could probably do, even though I'm a college dropout, like if I had 3 initials at the end of my name, it wouldn't be PhD, it'd be CDO, which stands for college dropout. But I could probably write a whole thesis on the answer to that question. But if I had to really bottom line it, you have to do a couple things. Number one is you have to really make sure that your body's in a clean state. So like if you're eating inflammatory foods, if your like hormones are out of whack, if your brain's messed up, if your gut's messed up, like it's going to be very difficult to generate positive emotional states for long periods of time, because you just wake up basically feeling hungover all the time. So there has to be a level of clean eating, and also movement is very important too. So whether it's yoga, training, high intensity interval training. I'm not personally a fan of CrossFit. I know a lot of people do love that. I think CrossFit's the fastest way to get injured. But, like I do think that, moving your body and making your body stronger are important. So if you're having a clean body, and you're moving that body consistently and you're getting sleep, then what we can talk about are some of the more sort of tangible personal development tools. So the first thing is you have to understand that like you have a choice. You can either see everything that's in life is either a gift helping you or it's against you. Or another way to think of it is it's happening for you or it's happening to you. So you have to ask yourself the question, am I a victim of my circumstance or am I the creator of my circumstance? And you can't pick and choose. You can't say like, well, I'm the creator of my circumstance over here, but over here I'm a victim. Because how you do one thing is how you do everything. And you can't, you can't cherry pick that. Einstein says that either everything's a miracle or nothing is a miracle. You can't cherry pick and decide. And so you have to fundamentally ask yourself the question, can I and am I ready to take 100% responsibility for how I'm showing up in every area of my life? And then you start to see that like, oh my gosh, I'm actually potentiating and causing a lot of the suffering that I'm experiencing. I was blaming somebody else, but what I'm really seeing is that like, you know what? When I'm in this blame conversation or when I'm in this negative tailspin, yeah, that person might be contributing to this, but I'm playing off of it. And also, if I'm in this conversation of blame, I'm not moving forward doing what I want to be doing. I'm actually totally like distracting myself. And so if you can start to take accountability and responsibility, not necessarily for what happened to you, but how you respond to what happened to you, then you go from what's called a victim sort of mindset or consciousness into more accountability. And from that place, then you need basically 3 concepts. And I'll do my best to make it actionable. But when we're talking about emotional states, the first thing you have to have is emotional awareness. So you have to figure out what you're feeling. And especially for men, that's not exactly something that's like, yeah, I can't wait to figure out how I'm feeling. Like that's really just not a conversation that most men are having. But when you start to become aware of how you're feeling, we come in contact with the negative emotions first. And you have to understand that those negative emotions are there for a purpose. It's like they're guiding you. It's like a feedback loop. And I believe that every emotional state that we have is the appropriate response to the underlying pattern or the underlying symptoms or the underlying root cause. So if we have a dysfunctional underlying root cause or a trauma that's underlying our emotional states, then we're going to be feeling anxiety, stress, negativity, shame, anger, guilt, unworthiness, you name it. So you have to start to become aware of how you feel and then do some digging around, well, what's causing this? And you can think of it no different than, doing a test if you have something wrong with you, if you have high cholesterol. These days, good doctors don't just give you a statin to lower your cholesterol. They want to know why you have high cholesterol and find the root cause. So we have to find the root cause of the emotion, the negative emotion that you're feeling. And then from there, start to realize, you know what? Whatever happened in the past, I gave it a certain meaning or context, or I saw it a certain way, had a certain interpretation of what happened. And if I'm really honest, I deleted, I distorted, and I generalized what happened. I'm not seeing this fully. So maybe I'm 5 years old and I'm experiencing a trauma, or maybe it's something simple like I'm 7 or 10 years old and my father or mother is like 10 minutes late picking me up from school. We see things as a youth in a different lens and not completely, and our brain deletes, distorts, and generalizes things. So you start to ask yourself questions like, well, what else could this mean? How else can I see this? What else is there that I missed? And you start to realize that, you know what, like maybe you latched on to a meaning or a belief or an interpretation of the past that helped you survive, it helped you cope, and so therefore you could say that you're grateful for it. But yesterday's medicine has become today's poison. So then what you have to go from is not just emotional awareness, you have to graduate into emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is like, okay, well, how do I want to feel? Because most people spend their time talking about what they don't want, what they're concerned about, what their problems are. They complain. They say this is what they don't want. But it's rare to hear someone say, well, this is what I do want. I want to feel good. I want to discover what my purpose emotions are. I want to figure out who I have to become to live that life every day. And you can think of emotional intelligence as like a recipe. You have the recipe for how you want to feel. And that could be a combination of serving other people, a certain food plan, a certain movement pattern, certain belief systems, certain coaching, certain being of service to other people, whatever that might be. But then the third part, and this is the hard part, is you got to have emotional fitness. And so you can think of it like, I just talked about emotional intelligence. That's like having the workout plan, right? But to be fit, you actually have to do the workout. And the cool thing about training is that training creates micro traumas that your body heals from. That's how one gets stronger. And also, real sustainable weight loss isn't about depriving your body. It's really about hormonal balance and homeostasis. And that's like what creates long-term weight loss. And so the realization that like emotional fitness is like the name of the game, then you view your life in a way that you would like training. So no one ever said, I worked out once 10 years ago and why don't I have a six-pack still? No one says that. But people say all the time, well, I had a breakthrough at this seminar, or I read the book 10 years ago and I worked on it. Well, yeah, you worked on it once. So it has to become a lifestyle and a way that you relate to life on a daily basis, just like training, just like a meal plan, just like, taking a shower. It's not like I took a shower 10 years ago. Why do I smell so bad? Because you haven't taken a shower in 10 years. That's why. So you have to make it a daily practice. And it's a very personal thing. The food, processes, the goals, the habits that are right for you, Mike, might be completely different than for me. And so, we have this individuality. Everyone has a very unique expression of how this comes out. But the fundamentals are there: emotional awareness, emotional intelligence, and emotional fitness. And if you start to view life as everything's happening for you, even the hard stuff, then you relate to it in a different way. And you see everything as an opportunity to grow. You see everything as an opportunity to serve other people, as an opportunity to lessen pain. And most importantly, not pass on your suffering to somebody else. That's the benefit.
I want to play devil's advocate here for a second and ask you, what do you do if you know exactly what you need to do, right? I know I need to wake up and go to the gym. I know I need to read. If those are the things that are going to give me the results that I keep telling myself I want, right? And I have the ability to do those things. Let's just say you're in a situation where you have the time and you have the freedom, the ability to go to the gym, get your workouts on, get your reading in, and yet you still don't. So, what is that kind of block that is preventing you from moving forward, right?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we all suffer from it. So the Greeks had multiple words for love, right? They had agape, eros, many different words, and they meant different things. And yet we have one word for fear. And I don't think that that's an accurate enough vocabulary. There's different types of fear. There's good fear, which is like, hey, the building is burning down, I should probably leave. And then there's bad fear, which leads to procrastination and the things that you're perfectionism, stuff like that. And the reason why we don't hang with something for a long period of time is a couple things. Or the reason why we don't get started is because our nervous system essentially says that behavior pattern essentially will kill me. That's the fear. So if you follow anyone's block or anyone's fear down to like its root cause, it all ends in this irrational thought, and then I'll die. And I call that type of fear a survival pattern. So a survival pattern is not bad. It's just what you've done to survive. And so when you start looking at things like, for example, training at the gym, the body doesn't want to lose weight. Because we're not used to, the body doesn't necessarily believe that we live in this abundant world of food. The body's used to famine and for many generations. So it's very difficult to lose weight because you're fighting the body's natural survival mechanisms. So procrastination is the same thing. Basically, the nervous system is like a thermostat, and it wants you to stay exactly as you are. So whenever you have this hopeful wish to actually change your life, the reason why your behavior doesn't match that intention yet is because a part of you, a dominant part of you, is convinced that unconsciously, you're not thinking of this consciously. This is a blind spot for you, that behavior pattern will actually lead to your destruction, which is completely crazy to think about, but 100% of the time it's true. So what has to happen essentially for you to have a long-term habit change or behavior change is a couple things. Number one, you have to start to crave the transformation that you want. So when we have a craving for something, it just becomes a habit. And we can talk about how that happens. The second thing is you basically have to follow that behavior of okay, I didn't go to the gym today. Why? Right? And make something up, but maybe you know what? I had to focus on something for my wife or focus on something for my family. And so, why did I do that? Well, because it's really important. And so then we're in the conversation of, so you value your family more than yourself. And a lot of people just, have survived by taking care of other people, and they don't really believe that it's okay for them to choose themselves. And so then we get down into some of the survival programming that's been there for very long periods of time. So on a behavior level, it might seem very simple. I had a client once, all I wanted to do is convince her to get somebody to help her do the laundry, and she would refuse to give it up. And we traced it back, and she experienced significant sexual abuse. And, she was scared of becoming more emotionally intimate with her husband. And so the laundry was a way she was unconsciously keeping them sort of distant, which you would never think of consciously, I do my laundry because I'm scared of connecting with you. That makes no sense. But when you trace it back to the root cause, it makes total sense. So, there's always going to be something that's going to prevent you from moving forward. And the goal is to become aware of your survival patterns, why they're there, the stories you tell yourself, the beliefs that created them, the meanings, the emotional states, and then start to understand that's not entirely who I am. I can move beyond it. And when you start to start to have compassion for the part of yourself that's scared to move forward versus shame or guilt or thinking that, you're whatever, weak or whatever. Instead, you say, you know what, it actually makes total sense that I do this based on what happened in the past. And I'm actually safe to move forward. People feel relief all the time, and they can actually start to move forward. So it's more about understanding and having some self-awareness around why I do this than making myself wrong for doing it.
So how can people get that help or go through that process to identify those blocks, right? Because this doesn't sound like something that you could easily do on your own without an experienced hand. I know that's something that Tony takes people through Date with Destiny. Do you have a specific process that people can follow? But
totally.
How do you go through it?
Totally. And I want to clarify a little bit of the distinction, the difference between what I do and what Tony does, because I spent a lot of time thinking about this. Tony is, he calls himself, and he is really good at peak performance. That's what he does, getting people into a really peak state. And I believe in that. What I do is I help people feel that being in an elevated state or a peak state is safe, essentially. So a lot of times whenever you have a moment of clarity, you have a moment of being in a peak state, if you don't maintain it and you revert back, it's because you have programming internally that says it's not safe to maintain that state. And so I basically help people feel that being successful or being happy, is really basic idea, is actually safe. Which sounds simple, but it requires a process. And not to be self-serving, but that's exactly why I wrote this book, because I've been working with people in high-end coaching programs and retreats for, a decade. And, I wanted to reach more people. So I broke it down to a 40-day process. And it walks people through the process. It's so simple, when you see the process. And I also put together a free online course, companion course, to help people guide people through the process as well. And so that's why I wrote the book. It's only, what is it, like $15 or something like that? It's totally, it's reasonable. But before that, at least in my world, like you had to come to Bali or Maui and be on an 11-day retreat with me. It's $10,000 or more. And now you have this book, and that's why I wrote it, because I didn't want this to be something that was just for like people who could afford that type of stuff. I wanted this to be for everybody. And that was before the world was the way that it is today. Now it seems like even more necessary because everybody's got this stuff coming up. So it's a process. It's a 40-day process. I walk people through the process. It's very simple. If you can get through the first 5 days, the rest of it's awesome, essentially. Cool. But yeah, I mean, that's exactly why I wrote the book, is because I knew that people needed a framework that they could go through this on their own without having to have access to someone like me directly.
Yeah. And by the way, guys, the name of the book is Claim Your Power. And it's excellent. And I'm not just saying that because we're recording right now. I dove in, and within the first 50 pages, I was like, oh my God, this is what I've been looking for a long time.
It's a lot.
So yeah, it's awesome. Do you still do any personal coaching if there's some high performers listening to this who are like, you know what, I really want to work with Mastin personally, or is that something that you no longer do?
So I do. We have an online course that's the next level up from the book. And then we have a Claim Your Power Live event that's a 4-day event every summer. And then we do have a year-long program called Prosper X. And we hit 4 quadrants of your life over that 12-month program. And it's, as far as I know, it's the most immersive, and we hold hands for people who like want to like quit a job or like really go to the next level. We have like 400 touch points throughout the year in that program. And because what I've seen is that immersion is not enough. People have to have sort of like really close proximity for long periods of time to get that initial momentum going. So I do that work, and then I do some consulting from time to time. But I've really been focusing a lot of my stuff right now on talking about the Claim Your Power process in the book, because I released it in 2017, and I wanted to have a very organic, slow build of the book without it being some flash in the pan. Because I don't write books every year. I write a book because I have something to say, and a lot of the content that I create is created over years working it out with clients in private practice. So it's a very meaningful process for me. So there's the book, there's the online course, there's the live event, and then we have the Prosper X program.
Now we've got a few minutes left. Do you have any other success stories that you can share? Because I always love hearing stories, right? Like the woman doing her laundry and things like that. I think it gives folks an opportunity to, essentially connect and with others who are like, yeah, that's totally describing me and my problem, right?
Totally. Yeah. Well, there's 2 that come to mind right away. One is a woman I worked with, and this actually scared the crap out of me in the beginning. I was like, oh my God, what have I got myself into? So I had started my first high-end group, and one of the clients I had been working with for a long period of time, she was the first to sign up for pretty much everything that we do. And she was starting her business, and so she signed up for this high-end group. And about a month in, she's like, oh yeah, Mastin, so my husband and I, we were going to be doing IVF with this money.
In vitro fertilization. Yep.
Yeah. And instead we signed up for your program. And I was like, oh my God, like what? Like too much pressure, guys. And she ended up going from $2,000 months to $30,000 days, which was pretty incredible. So she got a big ROI on that. But that was really scary, because I felt that. Like I felt the responsibility of that. That was pretty crazy. And then I think my most recent favorite story is a gentleman we work with, Dan Mason. And Dan came to us and just sort of like after quitting a soul-sucking job and getting a little bit of traction in his business. But after kind of going through our process and really looking at like his blocks and getting clear on his purpose, launched a #1 podcast that was like #1 in his category, beat me, beat Lewis. Like it was like came out like out of the gate, which was amazing. And Dan's doing $30,000 months now too. And he's earned more, I think, this in the last 6 months than he thought he would do in 2 years. And I really love that stuff, because I don't love money. I care about it. It's necessary, but I don't make decisions for financial decisions. I do stuff because I want to do it and it's fun. But one of the cool benefits of living your purpose is that 100% of the time when you live your purpose, abundance follows. And that sounds like a overly simple, like vague promise that may or may not come true, but it's just the nature of things. Like when you're really serving other people, your survival will be effortless. And I always enjoy people who go from like oh my God, this is going to work. Oh, and they freak out. And then they start serving people, and then they don't even realize it. And like money's coming in. And I love that that arc. And we see so many people go through that arc. But it's really fun to watch people, face their fears and step into a larger experience of their life. To me, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been awesome, Mastin. Thank you so much for the time today. Thank you for putting all of that effort into the book. There's a lot of authors we have on the show, but there's very few books that I can wholeheartedly recommend to folks.
Oh, that means a lot.
Yeah, no, this is great. There's something in here for everyone, and what you're really offering here is foundational transformation, which is just the coolest thing ever. So
amazing.
It's pretty amazing.
Well, Mike, I appreciate that, man. It means a lot to me.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
much. Where can folks go to connect with you? Obviously, they can go to Amazon to pick up a copy of Claim Your Power, but where can they connect with you?
Yep. Everything's over at mastinkipp.com. Everything is right there. And then also, if you go to claimyourpowerbook.com, you can enter your information and get access to that free course that accompanies the book too, which people love. They feel like when the course is over, it's 40 days. We hear a lot of people say that's like their favorite show ended or whatever, because they binged watched it or whatever. So that's been really fun to hear too.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you so much again, guys, gals. Thanks for listening as always. And if you loved today's show as much as I hope you did, we'd love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and maybe share this with those you care about. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.